and welcome to the 173rd edition of the Illegal Motion College Football Podcast. In Nashville, Tennessee, I'm the professor, Matt Perkins. And a dig route across the Harpeth River from me here in the Music City, it's our own offensive coordinator, the coach, Corey Burton.
What's up, guys? Well, if you haven't been following Hillwood football, it is playoff time here in the mid-state, or here in the entire state of Tennessee. We have our first round matchup this week against the Page Patriots. So we're going to the turf in Franklin, the artificial kind that is, and we're going to take on the Page Patriots. But first, we've got a couple podcasts to knock out in preparation. So I'm excited to be here and excited for a good matchup this Friday. I think we can win.
All right, well, we can't get it started without the third amigo in the Second City, a man who believes that all adders are puffs, our intrepid blogger from Big Ten and Counting, Josh Cook.
That's an inside joke for one of our favorite TV shows. Top Gear, R.I.P. It just hasn't been the same. And now another new cast, Matt.
Do they finally get rid of Matt LeBlanc?
He retired of his own accord. He said that the travel was too strenuous.
And get rid of, what was it, Chris Evans?
Yeah, he might have been tossed after his one season.
He was bad.
No.
He was real bad. So the only Sabine Schmidt was the only good part of that cast. So anyhow, that's a different story for a different day. We got a lot of football to get through. So we're going to start off with some quick slants tonight. So Josh, I'm going to throw it out to you first. I think there was an FCS player that caught your eye this weekend.
Yeah, I think he caught everyone's eye. Aaron Dawson at Central Connecticut State University. You know, he had kind of an average first half, had about 53 yards, on pace for a 100-yard day. Nothing too special. The second half, he had 308 yards.
Oh, my goodness.
I'll restate that again. He had 308 yards to end with 361. Coach, you're an offensive coordinator. You ever get 308 rushing yards and a half?
No, not quite.
What are you doing, man?
I haven't gotten 300 rushing yards this season.
Well, might have to pop in that tape of Aaron Dawson. Awesome day for that young man.
Absolutely. Coach, a bunch of games on the SEC this weekend, but one of the best ones was Kentucky at Mizzou.
Yeah, that really was one of the best ones. That was a barn burner, a low scoring barn burner, if you must say. But Kentucky, who actually kept their SEC East hopes alive with a good comeback win, they were on the ropes, man. They didn't score a first touchdown. It seemed like forever, but Missouri was called for a pass interference in the end zone that would have been the final play. And the Wildcats got one last chance from the two. No time left on the clock. And what did they do? They scored. So it was – this game could be summed up in this one quote. Mark Stoops said, "I felt like I was going to have a heart attack." He also said, "Amazing victory by our team. Just could not be more proud of the way this group, just the way we stuck together." So one word really to describe this game is resiliency, and Kentucky showed a lot of that. Terry Wilson, tremendous poise, tremendous, just a clutch moment, throwing that touchdown pass when he needed it the most. Just all of these things that Kentucky that have led to Kentucky being ranked 12th in the country. They're sitting pretty in the East right now. And
they got a big matchup this weekend with your Dogs, who we'll get to a little bit later.
Yeah, absolutely. But, Benny Snell, he was the fourth leading rusher. He was held to 67 yards on 19 carries. And I feel like 90% of their offense runs through Benny Snell. And if you were to tell me 19 carries for 67 yards, I would have said, well, Missouri won by 3 touchdowns. But that wasn't the case. So Kentucky, again, they entered the game ranked second in the nation in scoring defense. And, giving up only 14 points.
To Mizzou, which is a big scoring offense with Drew Lock.
Exactly. And a team that scored 65 points just a week ago just couldn't do anything against the stingy defense. And defense and running game is just how Kentucky's been winning all these games. So, hats off to Kentucky. But I think the one of the biggest takeaways from this game, if you're a Missouri fan or even if you're a Kentucky fan, of how lucky you were or how much blank, blank, blank it is, depending on which side of the fence you're on. But that pass interference penalty was something that will be talked about all week for Missouri fans, and Kentucky fans are going, my goodness, the refs finally called something our way. So very scary matchup this week for the Bulldogs. It'll be the biggest game in program history for the Kentucky Wildcats. And so that
at least since the Bear Bryant era.
Yes.
I don't know about Kentucky history. I mean, that's a long time, but it might be. I mean, it's going to be a real big one.
Hey, I'm just trying to build suspense for the game. It's probably in the last 50 years, the biggest game in the last 50 years.
Well, talking about suspense, my first slant, I want to talk about a great game that took place at the Carrier Dome. And after my Badgers lost to Northwestern, which we'll get to a little bit later, I need to rebound a little bit. So I decided to go back to the team of my youth, watch something a little bit more enjoyable, turned on Syracuse versus NC State, game that I previewed during last week's preview show. And, there's the Purdue train coming by. They did not do so great this weekend.
Boil up.
But I was glad I turned on the Syracuse game, man. We talked about the potential quarterback conference controversy for the Orange between Eric Dungey and Tommy DeVito. But, man, Eric Dungey put an end to the controversy. This game, guys, he was 27 for 38, 411 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 picks, and added another score on the ground in this 51-41 victory over the Wolfpack. For NC State, this was their second consecutive loss, but at least their offense showed up this week. Quarterback Ryan Finley had some pretty gaudy stats, 473 yards and 3 scores, but his only interception, which was the only turnover in the game, came at probably the worst time possible. NC State had just gotten the ball back, down 44-41 with 3 minutes left in the game. 3rd and 10 at their own 15. Throws it right across the middle, picked off by Syracuse linebacker Andrew Armstrong. For the Orange, this win means that they are bowl eligible for the first time since 2013. So good on you, Dino. I'm very happy to see this for Syracuse. I think we all really like what Dino's been building there, and I hope that it continues. So, Josh, moving on from bowl eligible teams that probably won't get there. There are a couple not so great stories happening around the college football landscape.
There are. And before I get to the bad stuff, I just wanted to touch on Kentucky real quick. I was curious. I looked it up. They won a conference back with Bear Bryant in 1950, but this is probably their biggest game since 1976 when Fran Kersey led the boys to a conference title in the SEC, and to do it, they won at Tennessee in the finale. That was a pretty big win. They knocked off 15th ranked Florida, but not too far off. Saying it's the biggest game in a while, but awesome story for Kentucky. But yeah, Kansas got it done. They got off the schneid. They won their first conference game. That leaves just 15 ball clubs without a conference win. It's important for rebuilding efforts to get a conference win. Those can be really important for a springboard to next season. East Carolina, they should not be rebuilding. They're in Scotty Montgomery's third or fourth season. So for this, it's probably the tail end of his weak tenure. But they do have Connecticut, so that's a good opportunity. Connecticut has both Tulsa and East Carolina, the 2 fellow winless teams in the American.
Sounds like somebody's got to get off the schneid.
Yeah, so Tulsa, they've got Connecticut and SMU at home. SMU is playing a little bit better as of late, but that's still maybe a winnable game for the Golden Hurricane as they try and get going. Louisville, I'm sorry, I'm putting a nail in you already. I know you have some more conference games to go, but they are at Clemson, at Syracuse, at NC State. Their final game of the year is Kentucky, not a conference game, I don't see them winning another game the rest of this year. Rutgers, same situation at Wisconsin, Michigan, Penn State at Michigan State. They're done. Stick a fork in them. Western Kentucky, this is a team that just cannot get out of their own way. They're making mistake after mistake after mistake. They can't win the close ones, like against Old Dominion where they lost by a field goal, or Marshall, they lost by a field goal. And then they're also getting blowed out in some games. But they travel to FAU, who's had their own fits this season, as well as host UTEP. So an opportunity for Western Kentucky. Speaking of UTEP, not only they are winless in conference, they are 0-8, gentlemen. This is their first year under new management. We knew that this was going to be a long season. That trip to Western Kentucky, really a good opportunity to get a feel-good win for the Miners. The Rice Owls, one of the smallest programs around, they are struggling. They're 1-8, but they get UTEP, so maybe they can get that win at home. Bowling Green, they've already fired their coach, so this is kind of a write-off with their interim coach. It doesn't really matter. Kent State, they are trying to rebuild, and the rebuild is not going very well, but their next game is at Bowling Green. That bodes well for the Golden Flashes to maybe get a conference win. Central Michigan, 1-8 on the year. They are just all sorts of ugly right now. Their lone win is over FCS Maine. But they also have the Bowling Green Falcon team, so maybe the Chips pick up their win there. UNLV, this is a sad story. They have had a rash of injuries to totally derail what we thought was going to be a little bit of a rebuilding breakthrough season this year, and they don't have an easy one left. They've got Fresno, at San Diego State, at Hawaii, and Nevada, who's playing much better ball. That could clinch a bowl game for Nevada, so rough season for the Rebels, unfortunately. Mizzou, they just came up on the short end of being able to win a conference game. They are too good offensively to not get a win. They have home dates left against Vanderbilt and some random team from, I want to say, the state north of Louisiana. Speaking about that state north of Louisiana, yeah, it's been ugly. We'll talk about them later, I'm sure, because we're probably forgetting about them right now. And that leaves lowly Texas State. They are the only winless team in the Sun Belt. They are just 2-6 overall in the year, and they do not exactly have an easy run. They've got at Georgia State, who's been playing a little bit better football this season. They've got App State. They have a trip to Troy, and they have Arkansas State. Based on all the injuries Appalachian State's having, that actually might be Texas State's best opportunity. But those are the 15 teams just dying for a victory here in the final month of the year.
When App State is your best chance for a victory, that's not a good sign.
Nope.
Coach, elsewhere in the SEC, we saw a bit of an upset take place in Stark Vegas.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a sign of redemption for another quarterback. You talked about one with Eric Dungy, who had a horrendous game in the previous week or two, was in a quarterback controversy. Nick Fitzgerald was also he was the subject of much scrutiny in Starkville because he had a horrible game, probably arguably one of his worst of his career. But he wasn't going to be denied against A&M. The play of the game was that last touchdown where he just is a zone read where he just goes bursting down the sideline and just like he shot out of a cannon, really, and scores a really long touchdown. So it just Mississippi State just outplayed them in every facet of the game. Fitzgerald's stats: 241, threw for 241 and 2 touchdowns. He ran for 2 more scores again. It just, when Mississippi State has its passing game rolling, when Nick Fitzgerald has his passing game rolling, they're tough to beat because they're already a pretty good team. They've got that great tandem in the on the front seven there on the defensive line, and they get help from their secondary, Errol Thompson. I think I said that right. He picked off a ball in the end zone with 2:36 remaining that snuffed out any sort of momentum that Texas A&M thought they might have been getting. That touchdown run was 76 yards, by the way. Kellen Mond, he was 23 of 46 for 232 and a touchdown and a pick. But the stat of the day for for the Aggies, they were just held to just 61 yards rushing. And when you don't have that much balance against a defense as talented as Mississippi State's, a defense that we've been raving about all year, finally just really showed up in clutch moments, and they really provided a lot of opportunities for Nick Fitzgerald in that offense. They were just wreaking havoc on Kellen Mond all game long, pressuring him, rushing throws. A lot of plays that don't show up in the stat books, like hurries, forcing bad throws, forcing incompletions, killing drives, getting important tackles for loss, things like that. Just being overall disruptive. A&M just lives and dies on the big play. They weren't able to get a lot of that to swing momentum in their favor. Kellen Mond missed a few long throws. Also, that would have resulted in these big plays that they needed, and also the receivers didn't help. They were dropping passes left and right. Travion Williams, he had just 26 yards on the ground himself. And then the defense, instead of getting big plays themselves, they gave up a lot of them, and just all around, just an off day for A&M, and their defense just did not respond. Kellen Mond was off, the receivers are off. They just weren't on the same page. I guess the cowbells just kind of gave them fits and distracted them more than you think. So, great game for Mississippi State. A good job of really just getting back on track, getting a little bit of confidence back, as confidence was extremely low for the Bulldogs. And it's good to see Nick Fitzgerald, after one of the worst games of his career, just bounce back in the way that he did.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to see that. I think we all like Joe Moorhead a lot, and people have been starting to get down on him a little bit. But, I think he dialed up a really nice game plan in this one.
And he's new, and that kind of thing is going to happen. Like every rookie head coach's first year is a bit of a bit of a cluster, and you're going to have your up and down moments. Kirby certainly had them. Nick Saban certainly had them. Jeremy Pruitt's going through it right now, although his team is really competitive over there. They just can't seem to get over the hump in a lot of games. They had a double-digit lead against South Carolina. They just couldn't quite get over the hump. There in South Carolina was just able to run on will with them and able to get the victory there. But I'm impressed with what Jeremy Pruitt's doing at Tennessee. I think he's done a tremendous job of just making them competitive, and that's about all you can ask for there.
Yeah, and he's doing really well on the recruiting trail. So you got to think that in a year or two, Tennessee is going to be back up as another power in the East.
Yes.
All right. Well, for my final slant, I'm going to get to a couple Pac-12 games that we're not going to talk about later. That's the big one between Washington State and Stanford. But a lot of crazy
game that nobody saw.
A lot of crazy results across the conference. I'm going to sprint through them as fast as I can. We'll start Friday night. Utah rolled through UCLA behind 200-plus yards and 3 touchdowns from Zach Moss. Elsewhere, Cal at home in Berkeley shocked number 15 Washington with a defensive performance for the ages. Held the Huskies to 250 total yards, got a pick 6 in the third quarter that ended up being the decisive score in the game. Washington even benched Jake Browning in this one. He has really taken a couple steps back recently, which is not good to see if you're a Husky fan. But for them, it was a different Jake that ended up coming in for him, but it'll probably be Eason next year. Elsewhere, Arizona absolutely mollywomped Oregon on homecoming in Tucson, 44-15.
I love the verb there.
They were propelled by another 200-yard game from J.J. Taylor, their stud running back. Khalil Tate also had his best game of the year for the Wildcats. Their cross-state rival went into the Coliseum and proceeded to run all over USC. Eno Benjamin, 285 yards and 2 scores for the Sun Devils. Finally, Oregon State got their first conference win since they won the Civil War back in 2016, which ended up being the final nail in the coffin for Mark Helfrich. They won this one in a crazy overtime game against Colorado. The Buffs were actually up 31-3 early on in the third quarter, following the first play of scrimmage in the second half was a 75-yard run for a touchdown for the Buffs, but the Beavers came back behind quarterback Jake Luton. He had himself quite a game. He threw for 310 yards and 3 scores. In a lot of ways, I think this might be an absolutely crippling loss for the Buffs. They would have become bowl eligible with this win. Their final 4 games are at Arizona, versus Washington State, versus Utah, and at Cal. They'll probably be underdogs in all 4 of those. So unless you're able to pull an upset, Arizona's probably the best bet. But, with the way that offense is working right now and what they just did to Oregon, you never know. Buffs and Mike McIntyre might not be bowling this year. So before we get to our pop quiz, gentlemen, a quick recap from our sped formations from this past week. Corey, you and I both did all right this week. 3-2 for both of us. Josh, another rough week for you, my friend. 1-4.
Whatever. Hey, my Arizona pick, just FYI, they are quietly 3-3.
And they're still behind my Utah pick.
Yeah, but Utah has Arizona State, Oregon, and Colorado left.
My USC pick just fired his entire offensive staff.
USC has Oregon State, Cal, UCLA,
and Tyson Helton's just going to take over the entire team.
And so all Arizona needs to do is beat Colorado, beat Arizona State, and somehow win up in Pullman.
Yeah, that's gonna be a tough one. But we were all on the wrong side of that barn burner at Heinz Field this weekend. Pitt won outright after being 2.5-point home dogs to the Dukies. Corey and I were on the right side of that Iowa State game. They were 3.5-point favorites over Texas Tech. They won by 9. We all got Kentucky covering at Mizzou. They won outright, like Coach mentioned a couple minutes ago, after being 6.5-point dogs in Columbia. Corey called that Northwestern covering Wisconsin after Wisconsin was 6.5-point favorites, lost outright. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And guys, yet again, Jayhawks coming through for yours truly. They not only covered that 14-point spread at home against TCU, but won outright. Rock chalk, baby. Rock chalk.
Garrett Patterson isn't going anywhere because he is amazing. But he might have about 25 new assistants on the staff next season.
Yeah, especially that I don't know what's going on with that TCU team this year. I picked them to be second in the Big 12, and they have just fallen apart. They've gotten bad quarterback play. Defense is way more porous than usual. So, well, guys, before we get to our deep roots, take out your number 2 pencils, get your Scantrons and Blue Books ready. Time for a pop quiz. This weekend, UAB shut out those hapless Miners from UTEP that Josh talked about a little bit ago, 19-0. This was their 5th shutout since the turn of the century. However, there are 21 teams that have pitched at least 10 shutouts since 2000. So, gentlemen, your job is to name those 21 teams with at least 10 shutouts since the year 2000. Josh, throwing to you first.
So this is a tricky question because it can't just be teams that are good at defense recently. So, I left Washington off my list because they were pretty bad until Chris Peterson got there. But I feel like Alabama's a safe bet that they've been good for a while and they like to play defense.
That is correct. Alabama leads the country with 25 shutouts since the year 2000.
And all of them were 2008 and on because the early 2000s Bama was Haribo. So it's not Rutgers.
It's pitch to shutout, not Ben shutout.
Yes, pitch to shutout.
Oh, okay. Pitch to not Ben shutout. So okay, let me mark off Rutgers, Kansas, Oregon
Coach,
State.
I'm going to need an answer from you.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Give me Florida State.
Florida State is correct. They are tied for 9th with 12 shutouts.
Nice.
Josh.
Well, I know that they have been giving up a lot of points this year, and they seem to win a lot of games lopsided, but it's like always 56-10. But the 2000s do include Trestle Ball, where they're winning every game 6-0. So I will go with Ohio State.
They are tied for third with 15. Well done, Josh.
All right. Give me Boomer Sooner, because between Brett Venables and Mike Stoops, they have 10 shutouts.
That is correct, Coach. Actually, they are tied for 6 with 13 shutouts. Josh?
Nice. Well, one team that popped into my head based on some of that info Coach just gave would be Clemson.
Clemson. Oh, so close, Josh. They have 9 shutouts.
Oh,
Venables hadn't been there quite long enough.
Sorry,
yeah,
Josh.
but Tommy Bowden didn't mind playing some defense.
Well, apparently not enough.
Not enough.
That's your first strike, Josh. Coach.
Enough. Okay. Speaking of Death Valley, give me the other team, the other Death Valley team. Give me the LSU Tigers.
LSU is number 3 with 15 shutouts. Well done, Coach.
You are correct.
Nice. So I don't know how many they've had the last few years having to play in the Big 12, but Gary Patterson, he knows defense, and he got to go against the WAC and the Mountain West for a while. I'm going to go TCU.
Yeah, good choice, Josh. They are tied with LSU with 15 shutouts. Coach.
Speaking of the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, give me the Gators.
The Gators, Florida. Sorry, they're tied with Clemson with only 9. That is your first strike, Coach.
I knew the Gators would let me down.
They always do. They always do. All right, 3-3 with each have 1 strike. Josh, you're up.
Let's see. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a reach potentially because they haven't been in FBS for that long. But my God, Appalachian State knows how to play defense.
Appalachian State. Interesting choice. Unfortunately, Josh, they only have 5 shutouts. Only 5.
I think that has to do with the lack of time. I wasn't factoring that in as much as I should, but I know they like to play defense in Boone.
They do. They do like to play defense in Boone, but they only have 5 shutouts. So, Josh, 2 strikes for you. Coach, you're up.
It's all about the U.
Miami. Sorry, Coach. Miami also tied with Clemson and Florida with 9. Ooh. That's your second strike.
Come on, Ed Reed. Or shut out.
Well, this feels like a safe pick based on the 2000s still having Barry and Burt, and Wisconsin has played good defense in the past. I know they're banged up this year, but I'm going to go with the Badgers.
Badgers are a good call. They have 10. They are tied with 4 other schools with 10 shutouts. Well done. Coach.
I'm going to go on a limb and say I'm going to stay I'm going to go back into the Big 12. I'm going to go early Big 12 when Texas was really good before they hit their lull. And I'm going to say the Longhorns.
Longhorns are correct. They are tied for 9th with 12 shutouts. Josh.
Well, there's a certain Pac-12 team that likes to play like a Big Ten team, so I'm going to try the Stanford Cardinal.
Ooh, sorry, Josh. They only have 8. You have struck out.
I feel like Manny Machado. I just fell on my ass.
Coach, for the win.
For the win, I am going to say the Michigan Wolverines.
That would be a good choice. They also have 12.
Ooh.
Well done.
I thought the Rich Rod and Brady Hoke era would have been too long to knock them out.
Apparently not.
Well done,
I
Coach.
think Lloyd. I think Lloyd, even though you can't spell Lloyd without two L's, he still got enough shutouts to get it done.
Lloyd.
Lloyd.
You guys got number one Alabama. I'm really surprised. Alabama had 25. The second place team you guys didn't get, which really shocked me. You guys have never heard of Beamer Ball, apparently. Virginia Tech, they have 22. Then following them, it falls all the way off to 15. You guys got LSU, Ohio State, TCU. You guys were missing Boise State, Oklahoma. Guys, tied with those two at 13.
I said Oklahoma.
Tied with those two at 13 is Rutgers.
Chop that wood. So here's the thing about Beamer Ball. When I think of Beamer Ball, I think of the 1990s.
That's true.
Let's be honest, it fell off pretty hard. I mean, there was a game that they lost 6-3 in overtime to Wake Forest.
Yeah, but you remember when
I said Oklahoma.
You did say Oklahoma, but and you got credit for it. Don't worry.
Okay.
And you still won. So other teams you guys missed. Florida State has 12. Coach, your alma mater has 12. Penn State also at 12, as well as
Mark Richt never shut anybody out.
As well as USC. Other teams you guys miss: Kansas State, Central Florida.
I almost said Kansas State, and then for whatever reason, I went with Stanford ahead of it.
Kansas State, Central Florida, Auburn, Boston College, Tennessee, and perhaps outside of Rutgers, the most surprising team I found on here, Virginia.
God, I had BC on my list too because Steve Addazio, all he does is play defense. And before that, they had a guy with the crazy last name. He was a defensive guy. And then before that, they had Tom O'Brien, who was also a defensive guy. Why did I say Stanford ahead of those two teams?
I don't know. Josh, I was surprised you didn't say Iowa. They actually that would have been a good choice, but they only had 9. So,
well, I figured their Maryland shutout earlier this season was their first shutout since like 2010.
Yeah.
So I figured that ate up too much of the decade.
Yeah, and you guys got the other 3 teams, Clemson, Florida, and Miami, that all had 9. So I was the only other one that had 9 as well. All right, Coach, you win this round. Well done. Let's head to the deep roots now. We'll start where the world's largest outdoor cocktail party started out close. First half was pretty close, but ended with Georgia winning with a dominant second half. Coach, what in particular did the Dogs do to slay the Gators?
Well, Jake Fromm had a tremendous bounce-back game. I mean, he threw 3 beautiful touchdown passes, and I think that Kirby and Jim Chaney decided that maybe our identity is to go tempo and throw the ball a lot more frequently and mix it up more, because when you go tempo, they figured out you can still run the ball. You don't have to huddle up and eat up clock to be effective running the ball, and they decided to finally just let Jake Fromm be Jake Fromm, and that was and he looked way more comfortable. The defense tightened up in the second half against the run after getting pretty much gashed in the first half. They had 3 takeaways, so it was just an all around. They just bounced back, honestly. They did a lot of things great. DeAndre Swift had a 100-yard game, and he delivered the knockout blow there in the fourth quarter with a 33-yard touchdown run. Jeremiah Holloman, who hasn't done a whole lot up until now, or Jermaine Holloman, I should say, he had 2 touchdown passes, and one is going to definitely be used as clinic tape on how to execute a jump ball. And so just, again, getting Florida off the field, picking up huge third down conversions, moving the chains, just being able to run and pass at the same time, getting pressure on Felipe Franks. They were winning first down. They had trouble on second down. They would get Florida in second and long situations, and they would defense would give up a big gainer and make it third and short, and that really kind of helped Florida in the first half keep it close. But then once the Dogs started winning first and second down, things became extremely tough for Florida. Just a lot of things like that, and a positive for Florida was that goal line stand. 7 plays, -1 yard, 3 points, 4.5 minutes off the clock. Probably one of the oddest drive summaries you'll ever see in your life. Georgia gets a fumble recovery on the 1, takes them 7 plays to determine they can't move it, so they have to kick a field goal. So that'll be probably one of the things that's most talked about from this game. Kind of embarrassing for Georgia, even in a 19-point win. Very much impressed with the piecemeal of the offensive line. Andrew Thomas goes down early in the game. Solomon Kinley comes in. DeAndre Baker plays spots that they don't normally play. They held it down. Solomon Kinley goes down. Andrew Thomas comes back in the game. Mecole Hardman gets his ankle rolled up. He comes back later on and contributes, and just a great effort by Georgia, just a great bounce back effort, and you could tell that they've done a ton of work over the bye week, and really it's a team that's growing up. It's a team that's kind of finding leaders. They're kind of finding their identity, and it looks like it all kind of emerged in this game.
Josh, how did you feel about Georgia's effort in this one?
I thought Georgia just played to form, and they're the better team. They're the deeper team. They've had their coaching staff in place more. I think as Florida raised through the rankings and got to a top 10 place, people were starting to buy them a little bit more than they should. We all love Dan Mullen. He's going to do some really, really good things at Florida, but this is still his first year. Their offense was still kind of getting by with smoke and mirrors, and Georgia's too well coached, too talented to be fooled by that. You kind of saw it. Coach alluded to the second half rushing numbers for Florida not being as effective. Felipe Franks really struggled in this game, a step back game for him, just 13 of 21 for 105 yards. But the little things also hurt Florida. They're not good enough yet to survive -3 turnover margin. They're not good enough to have more penalties than Georgia. I know they had fewer penalty yards, but think of all the times penalties, stall a drive, get you behind the chains with a, silly false start, save one's first and 10, things like that. So the team that was supposed to win won it. This was a nice appetizer of a cocktail for future dates as Florida gets better and Dan Mullen gets the program where he wants it to be. But for this year specifically, it was Georgia taking care of business, one step closer to the inevitable SEC title game.
All right. Well, while Coach's team managed to get the win, we can't say the same about your team, Josh, unfortunately. They fell to the Nittany Lions 30-24. In our texting on Saturday, Josh, you said that Nathan Stanley lost the game for the Hawks. Care to elaborate?
Yeah. So, hate to rag on a kid, but Iowa had a beautiful fake play. TJ Hawkinson, not a soul around him, walk-in touchdown, and Stanley uncorks about 100-mile-an-hour fastball and overthrows a tight end by about 40 yards. Terrible pass. It was a pass that, like, a junior high kid can connect on. I don't know what happened on that one. End of the game, Iowa's down 6. They have first and goal at the 3-yard line. He wants to kill a play. He's yelling, kill, kill, kill. He looks up at the clock. The clock's out 1 second. So then he snaps the ball. Noah Fant, the receiver that was supposed to be the target on that play, is doing the correct thing. Noah Fant is looking at the wide receiver and telling the wide receiver we're killing the play. So when Stanley snaps it, Noah Fant doesn't move because he's got his back to the play. He's not watching the ball because he's trying to tell the receiver in a loud environment to kill the play. Without looking, Stanley just chucks it to where he thinks Noah Fant's going to be. Easy interception. Iowa couldn't win the game because of that. On that play, we had 3 timeouts. Take a timeout, Nate. You're a junior. You're second-year starter. Take a timeout. Or if you do snap it, you got to look over there and see, oh, crap, Noah Fant hasn't moved at all. He's not running his route. chuck it through the back of the end zone. Just stuff like that. He ended 18 of 49, 205 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks, a 13.2 QBR. The other pick he had was returned to Iowa's own 3-yard line, gave Penn State a super easy touchdown. Iowa's offense produced 0 points. Their drives ended in field goals. Iowa's touchdown were a special teams trick play on, hey, guess what? A drive that stalled in our red zone. And a pick 6. So, we like to be positive on this show. We do not single out a kid very often. But Nate Stanley, dude, you cost this game. Honorable mentions to the Ferentz family, because you want to talk about questionable coaching decisions.
Oh, I have questionable coaching. We actually have a guest questionable coaching decision for this one, Josh. So I want to hear yours first.
All right. Well, mine is Iowa surviving some shaky play. They blew their 12-0 lead, but they have a 17-14 lead late in the first half. So
okay, hold on, Josh. I'm going to cut you off here because this my dad literally called me on Sunday to ask this question. Or I should say, he didn't call me today. I talked to him today. He asked me about the specifics of going for it on this exact play. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Great minds think alike.
So go on.
Yeah, so it's first half closing moments. Iowa gets the ball to start the second half. They've got a lead. They're facing a 4th and 10. And they line up the backup quarterback under center, Stanley off to the side, well behind the line. Very obvious double pass formation. Penn State doesn't bite. Turnover on downs. Penn State gets to drive a very short field, set up a field goal to tie the game, take all the momentum. It made no sense. You kick it, you pin Penn State deep, you go in at half with the lead. Dumb.
Yeah, there's 37 seconds left in the game, or 44 seconds of the game at the beginning of the play. Yeah. Like, coach, like, what do you? I mean, you're at what? They're at what? The Penn State 42, I think, at this point, Josh.
It was on Iowa's side of the ball. Yeah, it was on Iowa's side of the 50.
Okay, so it was in the minus. It was on the minus 42, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
No, sorry. It was Penn State's 42, so it was at least positive field.
Yeah, Penn State's 42.
But essentially the midfield.
But it's 4th and 10.
4th and 10. And
44 seconds left in the first half. You're up 17-14. It's 4th and 10. You're getting the ball to start the second half.
Pin them.
Your defense has played, not a great game, but well enough at this point.
No, the defense had played phenomenal. The only touchdown at that point that Penn State, had was the 3-yard field that we gave them. Penn State had one drive that was nice. They put together a drive, and then they had a 3-yard field gifted by Stanley's interception.
Pin them deep, and let your defense go to work.
Mm-hmm.
That's my opinion. Pin them deep, let your defense go to work.
Yeah, definitely not the greatest coach game by Ferentz and company in this one.
Yeah. Well, one last thing. One
momentum is irreplaceable there.
Yeah. One last thing. Look, Stanley gets about 65%. Ferentz family gets about 30%. That leaves 5%. After the pick 6, Iowa cuts at 24-27. The ensuing kickoff, terrible lanes. The kick didn't get through the end zone. All the kicks on that side of the field had gone through the end zone. So I don't know if it was a mishit or Iowa was trying to get cute and pin them. I don't know, but the kick was returnable, poor lane discipline, 67-yard return to the Iowa 31, already put Penn State in field goal territory. Defense did their part. They held forced a field goal, but it made a 3-point game a 6-point game. Again, it wouldn't have mattered because Iowa drove down the field. They had a 1st and goal, but still it forced Iowa to play, oh, crap, we need a touchdown, rather than, all right, we just need to get to field goal territory and then see if we are fortunate enough to score a touchdown. I think it just added to the panic in Iowa that a junior and second-year starter ought not have. I mean, throw it through the back of the end zone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Coach, Penn State seemed to pull this one out of their butt, but I still don't believe in this team going forward.
No, I don't either. They just seem every win is just an epic struggle and fight to finish, and I don't think they can hold up winning like that. They need to show that they can win. I don't want to say with more ease, but I think if they want to prove to everybody that they're a elite and not a great football program, to take the words from James Franklin, they need to win in elite fashion. They need to, if they want to be elite, they've got to absolutely take care of it. When Iowa was playing like Iowa was playing, where Stanley was missing throws, they were going for it on 4th and 10, right around midfield, things like that. You've got to be able to make them pay dearly for those mistakes. If somebody like Nate Stanley's going to be off, like he was, you got to make them pay. You got to make them pay dearly, and that's what elite teams do. If Nate Stanley walked into the Horseshoe and started playing like that, you think Ohio State would have made him pay? Most afternoons they would have. If he walks into Ann Arbor, plays like that, you think Michigan's going to make him pay? That defense, yeah, they're going to make him pay, and that's what these elite programs are. And Iowa's defense, for them to overcome and make this game competitive despite Nate Stanley playing so poorly, shows that Iowa State is on the verge of kind of being at least an elite defensive unit, or just kind of have some elite qualities about their team, even if they're not necessarily, even if you wouldn't classify them as an elite program, they certainly play like it at times. And this is one of those instances where if you're an elite program and you're struggling yourself, you seem to kind of keep games close against quality opponents, and you can pull out of it yourself. And it just doesn't seem like Penn State can do either of the things I just mentioned. Everything's a struggle for them. Absolutely.
All right. Well, before we get to our next game, Josh, I think Iowa plays Purdue next. Is that correct?
That is correct. Down in West
did you hear Jeff Brom's quote today?
No, I didn't. What did he say?
Well, Jeff Brom, after Purdue just lost to Michigan State this weekend, Jeff Brom said Iowa is a far superior team to Michigan State.
I mean, I don't know why he's saying that, but I got to be honest. I watched a lot of that Michigan State-Purdue game. That offense is still awful.
Yeah.
Michigan State's such a one-sided team. You can't even say they're one-dimensional because they aren't. They have an amazing defense and then a what the hell is going on the offensive side of the ball type program. Still, it's a very weird thing to say. As a coach, maybe he's trying to hype his kids up. Maybe he's trying to lull Iowa into a false sense of something. But, Iowa, after that Wisconsin game, they came out super sharp against Indiana. I think this is going to be, I think Stanley plays best when he's angry. And you saw it, probably his best passes in that second half were after he doinked his thumb off of a teammate's helmet and he looked really pissed off. And he actually strung a couple decent throws together. I think he knows that he blew the game. I think he's going to play angry. And I don't know if it'll be enough to beat Purdue because Purdue's so fast. And when Rondale Moore gets going, it's tough to stop the train. But I think at least theoretically Iowa is going to put together some good game plans, unlike like what we just talked about.
All right. Well,
I will also be at that game.
Ooh, Josh, where will you be sitting?
I have yet to buy my tickets. So very weird scenario. They were like $70 before this weekend. And I was like, Well, Iowa, we got a tough road trip. Purdue, they got a tough road trip. I'll do a touch of some gambling. Both teams lost. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go on. They're going to be like $40. They've gone up in price.
Makes zero sense.
No.
Anyway, let's move on to the Big 12, where Texas' 6-game win streak came to an end in Stillwater this weekend. They thought the Longhorns had no answer for Taylor Cornelius. He led Oklahoma State to over 500 yards of total offense. Coach, how are the Pokes able to move the ball so effectively against a Texas defense that had been one of the better units in the conference so far this season?
Well, Cornelius was considered himself a power back, or he thought of himself as a power back. That would be Taylor Cornelius. He had a touchdown where he went flying through the air. Tylan Wallace was also somebody that just emerged as as a huge target. I'm laughing because as I read this article, I'm reading Taylor Cornelius's nickname is Corn Dog. Mike Gundy said that Corn Dog is a tough guy. He's a competitor. But Tylan Wallace, 10 catches for 222 yards and 2 touchdowns. Guy was a freaking beast all night long. You couldn't cover him. He was all over the field. He was helping his boy Corn Dog out. And going up and making jump ball catches, running great routes, and just kind of showing himself as like, man, I had never really – and this might be kind of a, get your head out of the sand moment, but I didn't know Tylan Wallace was that good.
I don't think any of us did. I mean, they've been looking for a number one receiver ever since James Washington graduated.
Well,
he just showed up.
They sure as heck found one. But this game was insane because at one point when Tylan Wallace, I think, caught his second touchdown. No, it wasn't it was a second touchdown where he had that jump ball where the 2 Texas defenders completely mistimed their jump, and he just went up and got it and said, "Thank you, I'll take that." It became 31-14, and I was like, "Well, shoot, they're going to run away with this thing." Texas came back. Sam Ehlinger was, he had a shoulder injury suffered in a previous game. He was running like he was a reincarnation of Jake Locker, who Jake Locker thought he was a running back and often forgot he was actually playing quarterback. He got heavily involved there in the red zone, running that zone read option, scored a couple touchdowns on that, which was pretty impressive for as many quarterback run touchdowns there were in this ball game. But I mean, this is a game that I gave up on and shouldn't have. And really, I just gave up on it because I slept like maybe not even 4 hours the previous night. So my body just quit after all of the stress that I went through watching the Georgia-Florida game, because, Matt, that I'm extremely calm and do not ever run the gamut of emotions.
No, Coach, you would never let your emotions get the best of you during a Georgia game, ever.
So between the emotions that I had for my Friday night almost victory over Beach, my less than 4 hours of sleep, and my Georgia-Florida game, I didn't see any of these night games really because I passed out. My body quit, and I woke up and my entire from my waist down was just completely like I'd ran 10 miles because I fell asleep funkily on the couch in the ottoman in my.
Okay, hold on. So for those of you who don't know, Corey. For those of you who don't know, Corey Burton's couch might be the single most comfortable couch in the entire world. I have fallen asleep on that more times than I can count.
Exactly.
And, I probably come over to your place at least once a week, and I probably fall asleep on a good 50 to 60% of those on your couch.
Yeah. And Laura doesn't, my wife, she doesn't like when I sit down oftentimes because she goes, yeah, when you sit on the couch, we can't watch any shows together because you just do not make it.
Yeah.
You can't last. Like she watched 7 episodes of a show on TLC called Married at First Sight. She watched 7 episodes while I was just snoozing away on the couch.
She should have called my wife because that is one of her favorite shows as well.
That's how comfortable this couch is. But unfortunately, as good of a game this is, the story of this game is obviously going to be Mike Gundy and Tom Herman almost throwing down and then bro hugging at the end. Of the game.
Josh. Speaking of Tom Herman, I know you were happy to see him lose again.
Yeah, I mean, it's just typical Tom Herman. He's an overrated coach. It's that simple. And everyone's going, "Oh, Texas, they're so good. Oh, they're finally playing some defense." Yeah, it's easy to play defense when your winning streak was Tulsa.
Which they barely beat. I think they won 28-21 or something like that.
Yeah, and we talked about them not winning a conference game yet. That USC game. Oh, hey, the Trojans have fallen apart and are going to be firing Clay Helton. They beat TCU. Oh, hey, they're under 500. They beat Kansas State.
Jackson's available if you know.
Yeah, they beat Kansas State. Oh, hey, there's another team that's under 500. They're 3-5, 1-4 in conference. They beat Baylor. Oh, hey, Baylor's 2-3, 4-4 overall. Yeah, they beat Oklahoma, but not because of their defense. In fact, their defense almost gave the game away. So they finally run up against a offensive mind. Oklahoma State's had a little up and down offensive season because they've graduated about 1 million players the last few years. But Mike Gundy knows a crapload about offense. And guess what? They took advantage of that. West Virginia next week, probably going to take advantage of that. Texas Tech in 2 weeks, probably going to take advantage of that. I mean, people are going on and on about Texas's defense. They're tied for 53rd in points against. It's not an elite defense. They had a good stretch of play against some crap opponents. This is not the final loss on a magnificent season for Texas. It's the first of several losses that potentially can happen. And even if they do manage to get back to the Oklahoma matchup in the Big 12 title game, I don't know why they have one, but if they play each other again, Oklahoma's going to run them out of the building because Oklahoma's not going to be fooled on what tripped them up in their previous matchup. So the playoff stuff, the Texas running away with the conference, that was just false narrative by ESPN knowing that they own the Longhorn Network and trying to prop up a team that is okay, good. They're not great, and they're not back. And they won't be back with Tom Herman. So that's simple.
No, they definitely won't be. I'm with you there, Josh. I think that this Texas team is still a year or two away. Well,
I think they're about a coach or two away.
Ooh, I still do like their defensive coordinator, though. I think he's a good coach. I just don't think that they have the talent there necessary to really compete in the Big 12 just yet. Let's head over to the Pac-12 next. The biggest game of the weekend took place on the Farm. Washington State was able to come in and win a back-and-forth game with a Blake Mazza field goal with 19 seconds left to secure the victory there. The final in this one, 41-38. Josh, another tough blow for the Cardinal this weekend.
Yeah, it's just they can't do what they want to do, and that is
run the ball and play defense.
Yeah, run the ball, run the clock, keep that going.
Run the ball.
Bryce Love, an okay day, 6 runs, 71 yards. His health does not allow him to be.
I feel bad for Bryce Love. He should have come out for the NFL last year.
Yeah,
he would have been a first-round pick last year, and his stock has dropped significantly. He's going to be a third-round pick at best at this point.
Yeah. Running backs don't have a long livelihood in the NFL anymore. If you can, I suggest you come out. But, Bryce Love, he wants to be a doctor. He's, doing a bunch of medical stuff. So who knows? Maybe he doesn't really care about the NFL.
I mean, I hope he doesn't because his future is probably not going to be there for very long.
Yeah. But, so Stanford, they don't have the running game that they like. Their defense is really struggling. And then, they're just not like the killer team that we expect. And by killer team, I mean, how many times does Stanford wear you down and then they're the ones winning a fourth quarter 17-7? Well, that's what Washington State did to them. Washington State wore them down, won that fourth quarter, won in money time, and just projecting ahead for Wazoo, like it would be stunning if they messed this up because they host Cal. Cal's a really nice defensive team, but I don't think the Golden Bears have enough offense to upset Wazoo up in the Palouse. They travel to Colorado. Colorado's free falling. Then they host Arizona. Look, I can joke about Arizona coming back to win the Pac-12 South, but it's probably not going to happen.
They're not going to win in Pullman. No way.
Yeah. And then that just leaves Washington. Now, maybe Washington gets their act together. They win the conference with the head-to-head tiebreaker, but Washington does not have an easy stretch because their next game is against this Stanford Cardinal team. And Stanford's got a lot of flaws, but Washington has as many. So Washington might be 4-3 the next time we do our recap show, and then it doesn't really matter. Then Washington could still win the Apple Cup, and Wazoo gets to go to the Pac-12 title game. So I would be stunned if Wazoo chokes this away. Gutty victory. They are a dangerous team, and even with one loss and people not being very high in the Pac-12, I don't think their playoff hopes are dashed yet. There's still going to be some more mayhem.
There absolutely is, Coach. And even though they don't have a running game, Gardner Minshew, Coach, has been, the transfer from Eastern Washington, one of the best quarterbacks in the country this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane what this Washington.
I mean, he was 40 for 50 in this game. That's 80% completion, 438 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's outstanding.
They did score a rushing touchdown. It's pretty crazy. But they do have a really good running back here in the wings. He's a freshman, Borghi, I think is how you pronounce his name. He's going to be a special back, and he's going to give the Pirates some things to work with and to become more balanced. But and you got to hear Mike Leach's definition of being balanced. It's not 50% run, 50% pass. His definition of being balanced is having everyone truly impact the game, which he does that. He definitely does that. And, just Washington State can just score so many different ways. Their swing routes to the running backs are considered part of their, quote, run game.
I mean, they are. I mean, for the offense that Mike Leach runs, they are effectively.
Yeah, it was born out of the West Coast system. There was actually a really cool article that was floating around on Twitter about the origins of the air raid offense, where Hal Mumme and Mike Leach were at Iowa Western Community College, and they had a quarterback that couldn't. They had a quarterback that was decent, but they didn't have anything else, and they needed something that they could do to give them an advantage, and that's kind of what they came up with. And here you go. But Gardner Minshew, 40 of 50, 438, and 3 touchdowns, just absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, I do not have the Pac-12 network, so I was relegated to just watching the highlights on this one. The 35-yard pass to Jameer Calvin was absolutely incredible. Just a short little dig route over the middle. Jameer Calvin broke 3 tackles and scampered down to put him in scoring position. That was one of the biggest catches. And then there was another one he threw into the end zone. I think it was on a post route in the end zone. Was absolutely incredible as well. Of course, Jaws for Stanford kept him in it. KJ Costello kept him in it. Stanford played extremely well. Not well enough here. I don't think they got enough contribution from Bryce Love. I think their defense was just overwhelmed with what Washington State was able to do. And they, fortunately for Stanford, they were able to stay in this because their offense really came to play, but their defense didn't, or this would have been a blowout. So I think, honestly, my takeaway from seeing the score and seeing the highlights was that Washington State can play some defense. They forced some big turnovers. So they can play some defense. They have a kicking game. There's no doubt they could score. They've always been able to score since the Pirate has gotten there. But the defense is finally kind of catching up, and they're able to win these big games.
Yeah, man. I mean, Tracy Claeys has been a revelation for the Cougars, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it before. He was instrumental in Jerry Kill starting to turn some things around in Minnesota. He's a really good defensive coach.
He really is.
He became a head coach, and, it was his first time being a head coach. He is a very, very small town Kansas guy. I don't know anything about his politics, but if I were to guess, I would say he's very conservative. And he was coaching at a very progressive city, St. Paul, Minneapolis area. It's one of the liberal havens we have. It's a very progressive university. They put the liberal and liberal arts up in Minnesota. And so it was kind of an inexperienced coach, round peg, trying to fit into like a square hole or a square peg in a round hole, whatever you want to call it. And on top of that, like, the university wasn't communicating with why those kids needed to be disciplined very well, that players then went on what they thought was supporting their teammate protest. University wants Claeys to tell those kids, get back in practice. We need to make money off of you. And the coach is thinking, well, I can't have a mutiny on my hands. I got to support my players. So he becomes the fall guy. And hey, that's life sometimes. It really sucks, but it's to Washington State's gain. Tracy Claeys, I don't think he's going to, be denied a second crack, especially what he's doing at Washington State. He just needs to find the right fit to be a head coach. But, Tracy Claeys is one hell of a defensive mind.
Yeah, he will definitely get another gig as a head coach just for what he has done here at Wazoo.
He probably got the job because he totally shut down Washington State in that bowl game in what ended up his last game coached on Minnesota's sideline.
Yeah, I mean, it took a year because Alex Gibbs was there last year, and he did a very nice job as well.
Yeah.
But, all right, well, let's finally head to Evanston. Guys, we need to talk about my Badgers. No Alex Hornibrook in this one. His replacement, Jack Cohn, Blackjack, as I like to call him, he actually looked pretty solid. He was 20 for 31, threw for a touchdown, no interceptions, but only averaged about 5 yards per attempt. He had a really bad fumble. But speaking of fumbles, Jonathan Taylor, tailback, even though he leads the nation in rushing, he had 2 more fumbles in this one, both of which were recovered by the Wildcats. That gives him 10 on his career.
One was a quarterback exchange.
Okay.
I don't know why those are solely blamed on the running back.
Well, either way, the other one was pretty atrocious. Coach, how do you cure fumbleitis?
Practice. You just work ball security drills and put them in as many adverse situations as you can to get them to focus on wrist above the elbows, press against the body, cover it in traffic, things like that. You just gotta, you have all the tools and all the bells and whistles that you can do in practice. You just gotta force them to do it and put them in situations where they have to do it and where it's advantageous against advantageous. Wow, I really can't say that word. Advantageous for the defense in those scenarios. That's how you do it, and then get them to believe if they can hold it in those type scenarios, they can hold it on the road in Evanston when the game's on the line.
Yeah, Josh, you know as well as I do, for some reason, Evanston is just a house of horrors for Wisconsin and Iowa. I mean, I was pretty furious during this one, especially at the play calling. I thought it was way too vanilla. Josh, at this point, the Badgers, every team knows exactly what they're going to do on every single down, it seems.
Yeah, and we like to call that the Greg Davis stage of watching football. That's what Iowa fans went through, and it's not fun, and it's not a winning formula. And at this point, I kind of feel like Wisconsin's out of the Big Ten title race.
They are. They're completely out. Northwestern is in the driver's seat at this point.
Yeah, Northwestern's in the driver's seat. Wisconsin has a head-to-head tiebreaker loss to Northwestern.
But, I mean, the Badgers are so good. They're going to lose to Penn State. I think there's zero doubt about that at this point. They get to play Rutgers this week, thank goodness.
Yeah,
but
I mean, Wisconsin has a tough schedule left at Penn State, at Purdue. If Iowa can get past Purdue, they do host Northwestern in Iowa City. So Iowa fans are kind of thinking, hey, if we can get Purdue, if we can get Northwestern, and if we can get Nebraska, we end up 6-2. Wisconsin loses again. They go
5-3.
Yeah, 5-3. Northwestern also goes 6-2, but Iowa has the head-to-head tiebreaker. Obviously, if Iowa loses this weekend at Purdue, it's done. And Northwestern is going to Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they succeed in that game, but they need to just do, honestly, what they did to Wisconsin, which is just turn it into a slop. And Northwestern looked like Michigan State, just wearing purple. They had 3 turnovers. They had a litany of their own struggles, but their defense just refused to break. They took advantage of Wisconsin's vanilla play calling. They took advantage of every missed opportunity and every mistake Wisconsin made.
3 fumbles in this game for the Badgers.
Yeah. One that I was thinking of that was an interesting moment was Northwestern scratches out a 21-10 lead. They kick a field goal, make it 2-touchdown lead. Wisconsin comes down the field, missed field goal. And that's the kind of day that Northwestern.
I believe that was a long field goal, I think. That wasn't that was that the one that was like a 55-yarder or something like that?
Yeah, 51-yarder.
Yeah, that wasn't even Gaglianone kicking that one. That was
no, that was Raphael kicking.
Was it? I thought it was Incy or whatever his name is.
No, he went 1 for 1.
Oh.
This was that might have been a situation. It was only 4th and 5. Maybe a more aggressive coach goes for it.
Coach, I know you would have gone for it in that time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But you go for it every time.
Yep, I do. They say 60% of the time it works every time.
All right. Well, guys, Josh, I'm afraid, though, that we buried the lead.
Yeah, especially since our pre-show meeting said we were going to talk about Washington at Cal. I had my notes up for that. So that's weird. But, yeah, we did bury the lead on Arkansas. They gave up 45 points to a Vanderbilt team that I think had scored about 35 points all season up to that point. It was ugly. And in all seriousness, this was Arkansas's last best chance for getting a conference victory. And they've got LSU next, at Mississippi State, at Missouri. That's a tough sled to try and get that win. And I know some people are thinking, well, what's the difference between 3-9 and 2-10 and just going, 0-8 versus 1-7? Coach, it means a whole hell of a lot difference in terms of momentum and what coaches are thinking, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So missed opportunity for the Razorbacks. I guess this was kind of a sad burying the lead. Normally it's more mocking, but yeah, too bad.
Well, at least they're not the Buffalo Bills, who, as we watch right now, it is 3rd and 32. They are down 25-6 with 1 minute and 19 seconds left. So at least you're not the Buffalo Bills.
Well, call me when Peterman gets in the game. I could use a laugh.
Oh, gosh. I mean, if Peterman gets in the game, it's a guaranteed pick six. I don't think he's ever played a game where he hasn't thrown a pick six.
Nice.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Coach.
Speaking of NFL, I picked up Kenyon Barner and started him because I thought maybe he would get some run out.
Well, he should have gotten some run out, but the Patriots' run game this game has not exactly been stellar so far.
He's got 0.4
yards per carry.
No, he's got 0.4 fantasy points.
Oh, which I think is also about his yards per carry in this one as well.
True. Yeah, I'm losing 192.3 to 139.5.
Sorry to hear that, Coach. Sorry to hear that. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us here on the Illegal Motion College Football Podcast for the evening in Week 9. So on behalf of our own offensive coordinator, the coach, Corey Burton, here in Nashville, Tennessee, and our own intrepid blogger from Big Ten Accounting, Josh Cook, up there in the Windy City, Chicago, Illinois. This is the Professor in Nashville. Saying so long and see you next time on the Illegal Motion College Football Podcast.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to the Illegal Motion College Football Podcast. To get in touch with the show, email us at illegalmotionpodcast@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter at illegal_motion.